Well, hello and welcome to another edition of the Lipedema Channel's Stories of Women with Lipedema, who will inspire you, who will answer some of your curiosities, and who will make you know you're not alone. I did recently, and you may have joined us for a lipedema patient roundtable. And afterward, I always email the attendees. And I had the most delightful exchange with my guest today. I said, I've got to interview you and have you on the Lipedema Channel YouTube channel. So, Lenora, thank you for being here today.
I'm happy to join you.
How did you, and you have watched every single one of the interviews on the Lipedema channel, so kudos to you. It's wonderful to know you're out there. What inspired you to connect with the lipedema community in these recent months?
Well, I wasn't out doing all the other things that I've been busy doing for most of my life because they were all canceled. So I just I'd been diagnosed several years ago, but I decided just on Facebook to type in lipedema and see what came up. And I saw that there were, oh my, all these support groups. And it was May, so people were talking about June being Lipedema Awareness Month. I never knew that there was Lipedema Awareness Month, but being at home in June with all my other events canceled, I watched a whole lot of webinars and I saw what many people were doing.
So we are so glad you connected with us because in talking to you, your story is one of inspiration. We'll end with this, but I want to start with this. You said my real takeaway is?
Oh, that you're never too old to take care of yourself.
You're never too old to take care of yourself. Now you are magnificently busy, even though we are all right now, as we are recording this, socially distanced, and we are, facing this pandemic and none of us can live our normal lives, but you still are doing a myriad of things. Tell the viewers, before we even get into your lipedema story, just some of your activities.
Well, I'm an artist. So this necklace is one example of one of the kinds of art that I did, that I've been doing for a long time. I'm a musician. I taught a class in another kind of art over Zoom in the middle of July because the facility where I was supposed to teach it has a lot of teachers among their students, and those teachers are taking courses for credit, and they needed to be able to continue to offer the courses for credit. So anybody who could teach a course from home was asked to please do it. So I did, and it wasn't the same as teaching on site there because it's a place that has both visual arts and music, and so it's a good place for me to be. I enjoy being there.
And full disclosure, how old are you?
I'm 75. I'll be 76 later this month.
I love it. And the only reason I mention it is the point is to inspire you. If you have been looking for answers for your lipedema, it is never too late to find them. And Lenora, you continue to seek answers as well. You're not done yet. Underneath your desk, you said you have a vibration plate.
I do.
And we've been talking about the Optimal Plus as well. It is a journey to find answers, but let's go way back. Many of the women I talked to say that they noticed that something was different even as a young child, but really for you, it didn't present until you were in 15, 16 years old. But you said something really interesting about being a premature baby.
Yes, I was a 7-month baby and I weighed 3 pounds 6 ounces when I was born. I spent 6 weeks in an incubator and my parents brought me home in a Kleenex box.
Okay, that's teeny tiny.
So,
and you said that it created an atmosphere where they were like, please, we need to feed Lenora.
yeah, I was always, please eat. And I didn't like some foods as a child. I didn't like cooked vegetables at all. But I loved raw ones. So I still love salads, and they're still a big part of my diet. But I do eat cooked vegetables. Um, and my younger sister, who was a full-term baby, was seriously overweight. By the time she was a year old, she was bigger than I was, even though I was 2 years older, almost 2 years older. And she was bigger than I was my whole childhood. So we didn't have things in the house that would tempt her. And my mother would only cook, bake desserts when we were having company or there was a special occasion. So we wouldn't have sweets around. We never had soda in the house. Uh, I never got used to having soda. So a lot of things that many women with lipedema have uh, that they have to get over, I never had to get over because I didn't grow up that way.
Your environment was conducive to you having a healthy body weight, but you did get teased about having piano legs, you said.
Yeah, when I was in my teens. And I don't remember exactly when in my teens. And I don't remember who it was. I don't think it was one of my friends. I think it was just something somebody who passed me in the hall at school said piano legs or something like that. And I still remember that, even though it's many, many, many years later.
We are all so, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I remember being so self-conscious as a teenager. And I remember a girl teasing me in high school saying I had fish lips. And I would look in the mirror just to see, do I really have fish lips? And, it's just crazy how we can feel so ashamed of our bodies or what some things that might make us unique. And we might even I like my fish lips nowadays, but when you were about 15 or 16, when you hit puberty, you noticed a shift?
Well, I noticed a shift. I got curves, but I was an hourglass. And I had a tiny waist, a reasonable sized bust, and hips that weren't too much bigger than my bust. I mean, the kind of a figure that most people wanted to have, but my legs were heavy.
I also want to mention too that you were then taken out of your normal environment where your family sort of controlled your food and what was available to you. Not only is Lenora a musician and an artist, she also has a scientific mind, and you were off for a special scientific
Yes,
college trip.
I went to a National Science Foundation scholarship program at Michigan State University. And it was the first time I'd gone where I'd traveled by myself. Yes, I'd gone to summer camp, but my parents had taken me there and picked me up. But I had to take an overnight bus from Philadelphia, where we were living, to East to East Lansing, Michigan,
Yeah.
um, to go to MSU. And that was my first experience with dormitory food. So much like uh, often people who first go to college get the freshman 15 or the freshman 10, I gained 10 pounds in the month I was there.
And that is, like you said, not uncommon for people to gain the freshman 10. I think mine was more like the freshman 20. But again, you had an environmental situation that helped you stay somewhat lean. And that was the fact that you didn't have a car.
Yeah. Well, I didn't have a car there on campus, and when I came home, I didn't have a car. I lived on campus at the University of Pennsylvania, and there was a strike on a public transit strike, so we would walk into town, which was a mile and a half, and a mile and a half back. Didn't think anything about it. And then after I graduated from college and I had my first job, I also walked home from work every day, and that was 3 miles.
So exercise is a really good thing that we know now. Some of the women I spoke with when they originally were diagnosed, they were told don't exercise because we're afraid it will exacerbate things. We know now that that is not the case. But what's interesting, and we haven't even gotten to your diagnosis yet, but you did not have the earmark of pain.
No, um, and and maybe it came from having been reasonably active. Not all the time, but I certainly walked. From when I was in my 30s, I learned about strength training and flexibility and stretching and all those good sorts of things. And I know that for lymphedema, there was a thing that I was told after my first breast cancer diagnosis, which happened in 1998, that uh, you weren't supposed to do any heavy body exercise with your upper body. And then I heard that there was this doctor in Vancouver who'd done a study, and he'd actually put together a dragon boat team where that's serious upper body exercise, and then a control team of equally matched breast cancer survivors who didn't paddle, and there was less lymphedema on the dragon boat team. So I started dragon boating.
You know, you defied convention in many ways. You said that culturally, also back in that era, women were not supposed to really exert themselves.
Yeah. When I was in high school, if you were an intelligent woman, you didn't do sports. There were 2 or 3 exceptions in the whole high school.
Yeah, so you went against the grain and then you found a place that really inspired you to exercise.
Hmm. It was a fitness spa in Baja California. It's the oldest fitness spa in the in America, in North America, and it was founded 80 years ago. They were supposed to be celebrating their 80th birthday all this year, and they've been closed because of COVID. But we were there the first week in March before COVID hit, and I was able to, because I had lost enough weight by that point, to slowly climb the mountain that I hadn't climbed in 30 years.
Wow, that's tremendous. Now, you did say that recently you lost about 40 pounds?
Hmm. Yep.
So
Since
we're all on the edge of our seats saying, how'd you do that, Lenora?
so um, I finally decided to figure out why I was eating, and I realized that I was eating when I wasn't hungry. And I did some exercises to see when I was hungry, and I would serve myself a small portion and I would eat it, and I would see if I was still hungry, and if I was still hungry, I would eat more. I also was absolute at giving up sugar in any way, shape, or form. Sugar or anything that might be metabolized to sugar. I already ate a pretty healthy diet,
Mm-hmm.
but I cut down the quantity I ate a lot, and I found that I didn't need to eat from morning to night. That I really wasn't that hungry when I woke up in the morning. It was one story when I was working and I had to eat something to fuel me for um, for my work, which was, you know, demanding and stressful. And but I've been retired for a long time, so I don't need to do that. So I don't usually have breakfast until 11 o'clock, and then I try to have my last meal 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, so that I have a long period where I'm not eating, which is the concept of intermittent fasting,
Mm-hmm.
not taken to an extreme, but it works for me.
So you noticed that you lost weight, but the lipedema fat remained, but you still hadn't been diagnosed yet, had you?
No, I was diagnosed in 2017.
Okay, so let's talk about the diagnosis. You had a friend who had whole body edema.
Yes.
Tell us that story.
Well, she was an artist friend, and she was in one of my art classes, and she hadn't been in class. And there was a rumor that she was somehow sick. So one day I picked up the phone and I called her to see how she was doing. And we talked for an hour and a half or 2 hours. And it turned out that she had not been showing her face in public because her body was blown up like a balloon, and she'd been going from doctor to doctor trying to find what was wrong with her. And people said she couldn't have lymphedema, that happened suddenly, because she hadn't had any surgery to cause a secondary lymphedema. But eventually she found a doctor who specialized in edema in northern New Jersey. Kathleen Francis. And Dr. Francis looked at her and examined her and said, "You're going to the emergency room right now." And she said, "Can I go to the emergency room near my home, or do I have to go here to the emergency room?" She says, "If you promise me that you're going to go right to the hospital as soon as you get home, you can go home." And it turned out she was having kidney failure.
Oh my.
But at the end of it, I said, if she's that kind of a doctor in edema, maybe she can tell me why my legs are all so much bigger than the rest of my body. And I called and made an appointment. And she took a look at me, before she even measured me or examined anything. She says, "You probably have lipedema." And I said, "What's that?"
Yeah, I think a lot of people say, "What's that?" when they hear that word. It's not, although we're changing that. People are becoming more aware of it. So, what was your first instinct to do?
Well, I asked her what I should do about it. And she says, "Well, you can't really do anything to make it better." She said, and of course, this is four, three, 3 years ago, and 3.5 years ago, and there weren't as many choices available then. And I found out later that she doesn't believe in the surgical treatment of
Mm-hmm.
lipedema because she doesn't think it's long-term successful. But she said, "You can stop it from getting worse. You can stop it from progressing to lymphedema." I said, "Okay, yeah, I might have liked to have it go away, but I knew what lymphedema was, and I didn't want to have that."
Yeah.
And so she said, "What you need to do is go to physical therapy and learn how to do manual lymphatic drainage, and you need to wear compression. And if you do those, you'll probably be able to stay stable." And she was right. I was able to stay stable.
She said something really important about the use of any of these tools. Compliance is the key.
Yes, she said. At one point, I brought her some exercise, some compression that was meant for exercising, which I had tried because I couldn't stand to exercise in the other compression garments I had bought. And she said, "Do you like it?" I said, "It's the first compression I can exercise in." She says, "Well, the most important thing about compression is compliance." She said, if you, even though it's a lighter percentage, a lighter weight than the others you've been wearing, if you like it and you'll wear it every day, that will help you even more.
That's a really important point to underscore for all of our viewers. And as I say in every interview, we are not offering medical advice, but we are sharing Lenora's journey in the effort to help you in yours. There are tools available to you. It's not one size fits all. What may work for Lenora may not be the thing for you. Maybe the diet Lenora is doing is not the diet for you, but listen to your body, find out what works. And if it's something you can do and you're seeing results, stick with it. Compliance is a key. I think that's one of the reasons why the design of the equipment that I represent, the Optimal Plus, is so important, because it's easy to use. If it's not easy, you're not going to use it. And that's really the point that your doctor was making with you. So you did have some surgical intervention, though, and it was related to yet another breast cancer diagnosis.
Correct. 16 years after my first bilateral primaries, I had a routine mammogram show another suspicious area, and a stereotactic biopsy showed that it was also positive, but low grade. And I knew what surgeon I wanted to see because I had been a peer counselor with other people with breast cancer over the intervening, or certainly the previous 15 years. And so I had visited every breast surgeon in the area, and I liked the nonsense attitude of the one I chose. And I went into her and I said, I want a bilateral. And she said to me, well, given your history and your family history, and um, I wouldn't disagree, but if you were 10 years older or not in as good health, I would say let's do a lumpectomy and get the offending spot out because you're going to die of something else. Then she said, do you want reconstruction? I said, well, I don't know. I said, I haven't thought that far. And she said, well, before we do the mastectomy, you should consult with a couple of plastic surgeons that I work with and decide whether you think that there's a reason to do that, in which case we'll arrange to have the surgeries back to back. And otherwise, I'll just do the mastectomy. So I saw two different plastic surgeons, and one of them I couldn't stand. And the other one was very nice. I liked him a lot. And when I said to him, look, I've had radiation on both breasts, I know that makes plastic surgery more difficult. What do you think your chance of success is? And he said, I don't know. I won't know until I try. He said, your skin still seems pretty flexible, which is a good sign. And he said, but I won't know until I have you there on the operating table. But I really liked that honesty. And so I decided to do the bilateral mastectomy followed by immediate reconstruction. And the only kind of reconstruction he would start with was what was kind of the standard for women my age. I was almost 70 at the time, and having had radiation, that also made a few things not possible, and that was to use tissue expanders, which would be replaced by implants. And it turned out that I spent 10 hours on the operating table, 2 hours to get rid of them, and 8 hours trying to get the expanders in. He had to graft skin in order to cover the tissue expanders.
This was not a good experience in surgery.
No. And I went home and I kept on coming back to see him every 2 weeks for follow-ups, and the tissue graft didn't heal. So, I'm going for several months with a wound that's oozing, with ABD pads in my bra, and finally I said to him, it's clear that this isn't working. Will it be easier to sew me up again if we get rid of the expanders? And he said, yes. So we scheduled surgery to get rid of the expanders and sew me up again.
Oh my. And that resulted in this body dysmorphia that you were talking to me about. Let's talk about that for a minute.
So I looked like a concentration camp victim in my chest. But my legs and my hips and my upper arms were still much larger.
That's really difficult. So I'm sorry, go ahead. But your doctor was very clever.
Yeah. He said, well, there's another possibility. I'm one of two doctors in the tri-state area who's been trained to do it. And he says there's a device that was invented by a plastic surgeon in Miami called the Brava. And what it does is, if you can visualize a plunger, a toilet plunger, that's over where you were going to have a breast, and it's a suction pump, and it's pulling the skin away from the chest wall. And you have to wear it overnight, every night, for a month. And then there's a space where they can transfer fat from where you have it to spare. Well, I had it to spare. So he sent me home with some websites to look at to learn about it. And the next time I saw him, I said, okay, it sounds like a reasonable thing. And his nurse is there in the room, and she pops up and she says, she can't tolerate a Band-Aid. How do you think she's going to tolerate the Brava? And he
It was
looked at,
true. You did not like Band-Aids.
I didn't like Band-Aids. I didn't like adhesive of any sort. And so he said, well, there's another possibility, but I've never done it before. You would be the guinea pig. I said, what? And he said, well, don't use the Brava. Just do liposuction and inject it where the breasts are supposed to go and see if it takes.
That also sounds very painful.
It was. But I went from being concave with my ribs protruding to actually being almost flat. So I could see it was working. And I was willing to go through it to get rid, I said, I'd been a pear since puberty, but I'd rather be a Bartlett than a Bosc.
And
And
as
so
time went on, you had more than one procedure,
I
right?
had five in total. I had four more, and each time I got a little bit more shape. And by the time I had an A cup or a little bit more, I said, I don't want to go through this anymore. It's enough. I don't have to wear a bra. I've been a C or D cup before. I needed to wear a bra all the time.
There are silver linings. Silver linings, Lenora.
And
So, I'm
so,
sorry.
so I said, that's enough.
Mm-hmm. The liposuction wasn't really about the lipedema, and yet it did help your lower body in terms of reduction,
Yes.
and it helped your upper body in terms of increasing your cup size. So you had to be pretty brave to be a guinea pig for a procedure he had never done before, though, right?
Well, he had never done it without the Brava. That was the part that was the guinea pig.
Mm,
And I was willing to try it once to see if it worked.
yeah.
And the first time he only transferred fat from the abdomen. And that's because the abdomen contains more stem cells. And those were more likely to be able to establish themselves to be more like breast cells.
Hmm.
And he still took some out of the abdomen each time when he went to my thighs and my hips. He wouldn't do my calves. I said, my calves are the most out of proportion. He says, yeah, but I won't do that.
Hmm.
He said, they don't have the same texture. There's not as much free fat floating around. And it's
Hmm.
true. They're very fibrotic.
Hmm. So are you continuing now? Here we are, social distancing. We're not really doing a whole lot of outside activities or seeing doctors as much as we used to. Are you still getting manual lymph drainage?
Oh, I was only given manual lymph drainage enough to teach me how to do MLD. And I found that for me, as long as I was wearing compression all the time, that was what really made the difference.
Gotcha. And then you do your vibration plate. And what are some of the other tools in your toolbox?
I have a rebounder, costs $40 at Dick's Sporting Goods with curbside pickup. And I have this is an exercise that only works on the pectorals. It doesn't work on anything else. And
Mm-hmm.
my pectorals are weak, so that they're kind of the limiting factor of my ability to do upper body exercise, because in order to try the expanders and then take them out, you end up moving the pectoral attachment once to get the expanders in and then back after you take them out. And so my pectoral muscles are like nothing.
Mm.
And have, I've been trying to work on them ever since my second, my mastectomy and all the and that was actually the other reason that I didn't continue doing the fat transfer. He wouldn't let me do anything with my upper body for 6 weeks after each operation.
Mm.
So I couldn't do any exercise. I couldn't play music.
And that is something I want to get to before this interview is over, because music has been a part of your life since you were a child. When you were 3 years old, you begged to get a violin. Instead, you ended up with a keyboard. But how many instruments do you play now?
No, I only play 3 now.
Only.
Yeah.
And how many languages do you speak, by the way?
5.
5 languages, 3
Some of that.
instruments. You are amazing. You're an artist. You're a blogger. You are so engaged in life. And I think that this is a message for the women watching as well, and the men, but finding something that you love that lights you up so that your life isn't just about your lipedema journey.
And my life is about never stopping learning. So I look at what's happened in the last couple months as a natural extension of my desire to learn. I, want to find out as much as I can about lipedema and see whether any of them fit and help me.
One of the things I always say is life can either make you bitter or better. And you're certainly someone who has chosen to take the hard knocks and you've become better through them. And thank you for sharing your story also of your breast cancer diagnoses 2 times and what you went through with all of that. But when we first talked, Lenora, you told me about this rare, unique instrument that you play. Can you tell us about it?
Sure. It's called a nyckelharpa.
Never heard of it.
That's spelled Nyckelharpa. And nickel is the Swedish word for keys. And in a few minutes, when I show it to you, you'll see why it's called that. And it's an instrument that actually dates back at least to the 13th century, though I play a modern version.
And you said that I wouldn't have to cajole you too much for you to play a little bit for us?
That's true.
Well, I want to cajole you because I think a little musical interlude. How would you characterize the sound of this instrument?
It's like a violin with acoustic reverb. But
Wow.
you have to make a decision when you hear it.
And that decision is?
What it sounds like to you.
Okay, gotcha. All right. So everybody at home, Lenora is going to play something for us as we get ready to close out this interview. And I'm just going to let this music wash over me, and you can let it wash over you too. Apparently, this is I'm not going to tell you what the sound is like. You're going to hear it for yourself. And so, Lenora, take it away.
Okay, I'm going to play a traditional Swedish tune, and which is much of what I play. But it's one of the few that was discovered on a piece of written music. And the piece of written music only said slangpolska, which is the kind of a dance it was for. And it had the date 1814 on it. And so a nyckelharpa brought this tune to a gathering of nyckelharpa players. And within weeks, everybody was playing this tune. And
Wow.
I decided to pick it because there are a lot of tunes which are more haunting and are slow, but this is a little bit happier tune. I thought I'd play a happy tune.
How appropriate. And by the way, the bow is a little different than what we're used to seeing.
Yeah, that's because I'm bowing this way, and I'd hit I'd hit myself in the eyes if I had a bow as long as a violin bow.
That would not make for good TV. So again, I am all ears and I can't wait. And thank you for sharing your gift with us. Applause, applause. Everybody at home is applauding too. That is so lovely. Can you hold this up? I've never seen an instrument like this before. It's, like you said, a little bit of a violin.
But the way it's played is that these keys press in and they hit these little tangents. They're called tangents, and those hit the strings, and that's how the strings are fretted. So you don't have the intonation problems you have when you're first learning the violin, because you can't play a wrong note, or a slightly off note. You don't have those kinds of notes. You have to. It's in here. I'll just play a couple. That's on one row.
The reverb gives it this amazing depth.
And there's a reason for that. There are 4 strings that the bow can hit. 3 of them are keyed with these keys. The 4th one is a drone. And so if I go and I just played all 4 strings. But the other strings, which are cut lower in the bridge, are called sympathetic strings or understrings. They're understrings because they're under the other strings. And they are resonating strings or resonant strings. Okay, so if I play, I don't know, I don't think you can see it that clearly here, but if I play this note, this resonant string is also vibrating at the same time.
Interesting. So you realize that we could do a whole show just on this, with all the lipedema people watching are saying, well, let's get back to lipedema. So I have one final question for you. How has your approach to life as a lifelong learner helped you mentally and physically?
Well, there are 2 things I'd say. One is that you never stop learning. I've heard that playing a musical instrument is something that helps guard you against dementia. Well, I play 3 of them. Learning a foreign language is something that helps guard against dementia. Well, I started to study Swedish when I was 70 because I wanted to be able to talk to the musicians who played, the older musicians who played this instrument. And unlike the young Swedes who spoke perfect English, they weren't as likely to want to speak English. They were much happier if you could talk to them in Swedish. And we were going to go to Sweden to study, and I wanted to be able to talk to them in Swedish. And the other thing comes from my dragon boating coach. And she said, you don't want to try to paddle as fast as you can. That's not what wins the race. Slow and steady and consistent is what wins the race. And so I think that whatever you're doing for yourself, you have to do it every day and keep on doing it. And sooner or later, you'll get some benefit. It's harder if you start. When I started, I was over 70 when I was diagnosed with lipedema. You don't have as many choices. And even if I decided that I wanted to go through surgery again, finding a surgeon who was willing to operate on someone in her late 70s is pretty hard. Because even though I'm otherwise in good health, they're concerned. They don't want you to have some other thing that isn't foreseen happen on the operating table. So I'm just keeping it the slow and steady wins the race.
And you are inspiring us all, Lenora. I can't thank you enough for your time. You started out with, it's never too late to take care of yourself, and you are living proof. You've inspired all of us to take better care of ourselves, to seek what tools there are out there. And your music, your art, your wisdom, you're just a really cool lady. And I'm so glad you were here today. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you for tuning in. If you know of someone who would make for a really interesting lipedema interview for the Lipedema Channel, let me know. Shoot me an email. I'd love to get connected with you and tell more stories just like this. Have a great day, everyone. Bye, Lenora.
Bye, Brenda.